I hope you can see me, hear me well. Too few. We had more people registered. I don't see people from last time even turned up who wanted to complete. Never mind. We'll complete it nevertheless. Yeah. Can people just also tell me if they can see the screen that I've shared? They can see the slides, the same slides we just went over last time. Cool, awesome. So yeah, I think we'll just give one more minute and get started. Again, there are quite a few. Actually, most of you might have been in the last class. So basically, there were quite a few exercises and code samples which I realized that I'll not be able to finish in the last class, which was there. I think we have 7 or 8 that we want to go over in this class as well, right? So we'll start very quickly. I'll actually, anyone who's not joined the last class, or even if were there in the last class, I'll still, like in 5-10 minutes, quickly recap what we did in the last class for everyone's benefit, so that you recall and you care of for this. Cool. I think let's just get started now. Okay. So let me go. Yeah. So what did we do? Yeah. So selectors, right? We started talking about selectors. What are selectors? We already know what are selectors. We started understanding different types of selectors, right? The universal selector, the type selector, class selector, ID selector, attribute selector. We know that ID selector, and we also discussed where which selector do you use, right? You use universal selector for pretty much if you want to style everything. There was a very interesting question also that what's the difference between a universal selector and writing CSS inside the HTML tag, right? Does anyone remember what's the answer to that? Raise hands and tell me. What's the difference between universal selector, let's say writing a color equal to red in the universal selector, the star, and saying HTML color equal to red? What's the difference between these two? Yes, Puneet?
Yes, so if we write it in star, all the elements get the color red. But if we write in HTML, only the base HTML will get the color red. Like the other elements won't get the color red, right? If we change them.
Right, exactly. So only the HTML tag gets the color red. And now some people might argue that why, if I write color equal to red, a lot of my elements do change the color to red. When even if you write color red for HTML, that's because that color is a property that's inherited, and if you've given that color, it starts inheriting from the top, right? That's a separate topic. Probably if we'll do the next few sessions, we'll probably talk about how is that figured out, how does the browser figure out, or how does the CSS engine figure out, or where does inheritance come into picture and things like that. Okay. So that was yeah, that we talk about the question that was there, right? There was another interesting question, I think, last time that someone asked me what was the difference between the root pseudo class that we write and the HTML that we write. Actually, I went back and learned more about it, right? So basically, root, when you say root, it's a pseudo class, right? Because it has one colon, and from my last discussion you remember that pseudo elements had two colons and pseudo classes have one colon only, right? So root is also a pseudo class, right? And what is the difference, and what is the root for your HTML document, it's actually HTML. So CSS is not just supported by HTML documents. There can be other types of documents where CSS can be used as a style language, right? And there is where in the CSS specification, when you say colon root, it selects the root element of the document where that style is applied. And in most cases, for us, that root is always the HTML element. Now, what is this? Still, is there a difference? Yes, there is a difference. HTML is a type or a tag, and root is a pseudo class, right? Now, this there is a difference in specificity. Now, again, people who don't know specificity, don't worry about it. We've not discussed about it. Maybe in other classes we might discuss. So specificity is basically figuring out that, there could be a div. It can have a class box. You can give it an ID also, box. Now you can write ID box and some font color equal to, yeah, sorry, color equal to red. You can say class box, the dot box, and you can say color equal to purple. You can say div color equal to brown. Now, which will apply? Which of these will apply? Because all of these target the same element, right? And that is called specificity, right? Browser figures it out by the way that the element with the which is more the selector which is more specific, the styles inside that will get applied to that element, right? Now there are again a lot of rules and a lot of understanding to it. I'll not get into it right now, but I'll just say that IDs are more specific, right? So basically, now if you give an ID, that will apply more. Now after that it's classes, after that it's pseudo classes, and then after that there is the type one. Okay, so here when we say root and HTML, root, because it's a pseudo class, it's more specific than HTML. So basically, if you say root font size equal to 24, and HTML you say font size equal to 16, the root font size will get overridden. That will take precedence. That will, because that's more specific. As simple as that. For now, just know that that's the difference between these two. Yep, and it probably will get into the question at the end.
Uh, yes, no,
Uh,
no, Vikram. Just a suggestion. Like share some. Like you must have gone through some details, right? So share some of the resources that you went through in this discussion of root versus HTML, right? Pseudo class versus what we do in HTML.
yeah.
Share some
So
resources in the chat group. Try if you go through it, because see, you have to go through specificity in a lot of things. So slowly, like people can pick it up, right? That's why.
yes, sure. I'll share that. Thank you. Cool. So yeah, and folks who don't understand all of this, don't worry about it. Okay, this was only for to answer the question that we talked about in the last class, and also, thanks for the suggestion. I will share all the resources that you might need. Maybe you don't need those resources, and the reason I'm not willing to, or I might not want to share it right away, is because I don't want to confuse everyone who's starting from ground up. And what I would want them to do is, follow class by class, right? Let let's not get off track. Sorry for that. Okay, so we talked about universal selector, class selector, ID selector, and when would you use class selector, and why we don't use ID selectors, and what are the other use cases of ID selectors. Uh, Please mute yourself and raise hands if you have anything to say. Thank you. Okay, so we talked about a lot of these selectors, and excuse me, and then we talked about the power of attribute selectors, right? We talked about how there are different types of attribute selector where you can specify start with something and end with something, contains, and we saw different examples also, and we saw the power of attribute selectors where, you could do something. Let me open an example that we saw for an attribute selector, and just to brush up your mind, and let me go to the next slide too, right? This is basically the attribute selectors. All these we discussed: starts, end, contains, right? And let it load quickly. Yeah, so in this, yeah, we discussed a lot of these attributes selectors here, right? Where we, style this progress bar, and based on the value we style the progress bar here. the image, if it starts with the alt text with the example, then we styled it differently. Yeah, we saw all these different types of things for the attribute selector. I think we did something else also with the attribute selector. Sorry about that. Yeah, this one, right? We did that exercise also where we had to, remove the underline from this GitHub link, right? And we wrote a selector for that where we said that it needs to start with HTTP and it needs to have an attribute of target blank, right? And we also discussed why attribute selectors are so powerful and why we should really know that, because as I said, most of the times when you're working on front end, when you're working on medium to large applications, most of the views will be dynamic, right? That's the power of the technology that we have currently, and that is why the job role itself is in demand, right? Because you can do so many things, and you can have views that are dynamic and change to the behavior of the user and the need of that product, right? So, and that is where the attribute selector comes into picture because you might not always be able to manipulate the DOM or give classes and write classes and IDs and just use them, and that is where this attribute. I have one example where we'll mix it with something and see how there'll be dynamic data and we'll be using attribute selector. Okay, let me go over. Yeah, so this was about the attribute selectors that we discussed. What was next? Yeah, we started discussing pseudo elements also. Can someone tell me what's a pseudo element quickly? Refresh, tell me. Someone other than Puneet. Quickly raise hands. I know a lot of you were there in the last class. What are pseudo elements? You see there are multiple of them on the slides that are shown to you. Where and how do you use them? Yes, Shishendu, tell me.
Pseudo elements are the virtual elements which are not exactly written in the HTML DOM,
Yeah,
but can be created using the CSS
yeah.
and stylized by the CSS.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for that. So those are pseudo elements which are not exactly present. You don't write it in your template, but they come into the DOM. Maybe by the CSS that you write, or maybe by default, the browser adds it with some of the elements. You saw that, right? So this is one of the example that we saw all most of the pseudo elements here. We styled this, this GitHub link, adding this anchor before and after tag. We also saw that we could add content and we could just show the emoji. Then we discussed all this first letter and selection and please mute yourself. Thank you. Uh, please mute yourself. Who's unmuted? Kindly don't disturb the class. Please mute yourself. Thank you. Yeah. So basically, we saw all these pseudo selectors. Sorry, pseudo elements, right? We discussed them in the class. We saw how do they affect our styles and what are these first lines and first letter and selection and all that. Okay. What next? What did we do? Okay, we did an exercise also, right? This was pretty new and pretty interesting to a lot of folks. We did an exercise which used this summary and details HTML markup. Summary and details, which by default it gives you a left caret kind of icon. And what we did, we knew that it has a marker pseudo element, and we just changed the marker pseudo element. And here also we saw the power of the attribute selector, because browser by default added this open attribute, and we used this to change the marker, right? That is where we saw the power of both the attribute selector and pseudo elements. So this was about pseudo elements, and then what we did, we jumped into pseudo classes, right? Pseudo classes again very powerful. We discussed about these interactive states of the pseudo classes. Let me open that quickly and show you. Just remind yourself what did we discuss. We saw some, CSS also here. We created this button. We saw how we added a box shadow, and for the active pseudo class. Who can recall and tell me what's active pseudo class? Tell me, please. Active pseudo class. What is the active pseudo class? Someone other than Sri Shendu and Puneet? Someone else? I'll come back to you, Sri Shendu. Or Bindu. Thank you so much. Tell me.
Yeah. So the duration of the click when we
Yes.
click on the button.
Yes. Zabiullah?
Yeah, last time I missed that. That when we click and hold it, that is active.
Yeah, exactly. So basically, when you click it and till the time you don't release your mouse, that's your active state, right? So I've clicked it, and you see we've added some inset box shadow here, which makes the button appear as if it's pressed. And when I release it, that goes away. So basically, this selector applies, right? So we saw that, and then we also saw this visited and link pseudo classes. Here we saw the difference that visited pseudo classes would be the ones where which you visited, and link is the default one. Okay, so this is with all this is something that we already discussed. Okay, so we took 15 minutes actually to discuss about the last class, but we saw a lot of cool examples, right? And we'll see more examples in this one. Okay, so let's start now. So let's start with the new one. We already discussed all that, and let's start with the form states pseudo classes. Okay, so let me quickly open the example. So form states, what are forms? Okay, what are forms? So forms are the way user provides input. One of the ways, right? Most common way, right? Wherever you want user to give you some input, you use forms. Different kinds of form elements, right? Input text is a form. Input type password is a form. A text area is a form. A checkbox is a form. A radio button is a form. A submit button is a form. Basically, button type equal to submit is a form element. What else? Any other form element that I've missed? Anything? Cool. So what we see in this example is a form. Now, some of you might have seen it, some of you might have not seen it. This field set is again a vanilla HTML. Vanilla HTML means that I'm not using any framework. This is coming from directly from the HTML. I'm not sure how many of you have seen this. You can just specify a field set and it will group and create this border that you see, and then you can say something called a legend and write that, and that legend comes in between that, right? And that way you can group parts of the form. Native HTML styling, no styling also has been done to center that contact information. So again, for folks who didn't know, this is something that you can do in the forms directly. So form is again a HTML element, and this input type email and input type and then text areas and all these checkboxes and all you might have already seen. I wanted to show this field set and legend, which is not very common. So now what you see here is some I've given them some styling, just to lay out this properly, and some the colors to this button and things like that. With some styling to this, some shadows so that it appears as a card and a background color and all that. And then you can style this label and legend and all that. I've given a user select none here. Something interesting. Who knows about it? Can someone tell me what does this user select none does? Raise hands. Anyone knows what does this? What is this user select none? Nobody knows. I can't believe it. Okay, so what happens is on basically on the web, wherever there's a text, if you click and double click, you can it will get selected. You can see this blue background. and sometimes you don't want that selection to happen. Okay, and that is what. So basically, when I'm clicking this label, I want this checkbox to be selected, but I don't want that select. I don't want. I'm not copying this. I don't want. I don't think users are going to copy this. So I don't want this to be selectable. So what would I do? Is you can just say user select equal to none. So wherever you say this label, I have said user select equal to none. So even if I click it, it will not be that copyable. It will not select. For H1 I have not added, so this is now selectable. Okay, let me just. I hope this was H1. What was this H1? Oh, contact us. Yeah, this is H1, right? For this we've not written, so I'll just write it and show you, so that you believe me. So for H1 also I've written user select equal to none, and now you see I click it and it's not selectable. So sometimes you might wanna do that. So okay, off topic. So yeah, so we've given some styling to this. Hover pseudo class also we already had discussed. So this hover pseudo class, I've given some background color to this button, and it changes on hover. Okay, all that is cool. Now let me quickly show you the form things that I wanted to show you are the other pseudo classes. Okay, let it go up, and let me show you. So let's style the button differently when it is disabled. Okay, so I will say button, and I'll add the pseudo class disabled. And what will I say? I will say background color is equal to gray, and what can I say? Yeah, there's one more thing. Cursor not pointer. I'll say not allowed. Okay. Now, what I'm here saying is when my button is disabled, the background color of this button should be gray and cursor not allowed. So don't worry about cursor not allowed. I'll tell you what is cursor not allowed. So first, let me go to this button and let me add a disabled attribute to it so that it becomes disabled. And you see the class changed and the cursor has also changed. Let me remove this. You see it's a blue color, and when I hover onto it, the cursor is a pointer cursor by default. So by default buttons have this pointer cursor. If you want, you can change it. Okay, so basically by this CSS what we say, that when the button is disabled, change the background color to gray and change the cursor style to not allowed. Okay, now there's something another thing interesting. You might say that I can just do this and it will still work, right? So which one should I use? This is an attribute selector. Okay, and this is and the one that we wrote earlier is pseudo class selector. Okay, so which one should we use? Does anyone know the answer to it? Both will work. Okay, anyone knows the answer to it? Anyone wants to guess the answer to it? It's okay, you can be wrong, just guess an answer. Why do you think in which I would just say that there are different scenarios where you would use uh, pseudo class or you would use attribute. Any guesses? Anyone? No guesses? Nothing? Everyone quite asleep early? Cool. So I'll tell you. So basically, uh, this disabled pseudo class it will mostly work with your input types. It will not work with your things like divs, etc. For if you have to explicitly do disable a div, you need to add a pseudo. You need to use the attribute selector, right? But if you're using input types, you would use a disabled pseudo class. Okay, then you might want to say that why would I use pseudo class, then I would always use I would always use attributes. No, right? Because pseudo classes by definition they say that whenever the button is disabled, this is basically the styles that will apply, or this is the pseudo class that will apply to that element, right? Now let's say later the browser changes that when this button is disabled, we'll not add the attribute disabled, we'll add something else, we'll say enabled. Enabled equal to false, right? Then also this pseudo class definition still says the same, still will remain the same, but your attribute selector won't work in that way, right? So basically it depends on the scenario that you're using. What I would tell you is, because you cannot use pseudo because you cannot yeah, because you cannot use pseudo classes for anything other than inputs. If you need to actually disable enable things other than input, you would probably use attributes, but if you're using inputs, you'd probably only be using pseudo classes. Okay, so we talked about this disabled pseudo class. Then there is enabled also, right? There is an enabled pseudo class also, which you can use. Okay, you can say enabled. Sorry. Yeah, you can say enabled is also a pseudo class. Okay, and by definition, this CSS spec, it says that, when the button is enabled. Now different, by default, what browser will do is browser adds, whenever the button is disabled in the form, it will add a disable attribute. Okay, it will not say true or false, it will just add a disabled attribute, and when it is enabled, it will not have that enabled or disabled attribute. It will not say disabled equal to false. Okay, that's the default browser form behavior. Okay, and if disabled is not there, and you apply this button enabled and whatever style you write, that gets applied. Okay, so again, you need to go back and you need to start exploring this, need to start putting these pseudo classes and try it out and see different things and see how they work. Okay, try to add it on different elements and see how they affect. Okay, then there's something interesting. Okay, let us leave this to disabled and go to the next interesting part. Let's say I have to select this checkbox. Okay, so how do I select the checkbox? I can say input, and I can say type equal to checkbox, right? Because if I go back, you see this input and type is equal to checkbox, right? So I can say input type equal to checkbox, and I can give it some style. I can, let's say, I can say box shadow, 0 pixel. I'll give it some blur, I'll give it some spread, and give it some, let's say, red color. Okay, so you see that this input checkbox now has a box shadow. Okay, but what I want to do is I want to give the box shadow only if it is checked, not the unchecked state. Okay, so I'll say checked, and now you see that styling has gone away, and as soon as I click it and it is checked, that time the box shadow gets applied. So you learned about a new pseudo class, that is the checked pseudo class. There's also an intermediate pseudo class for checkboxes. Checkboxes have an intermediate pseudo class. People who are interested, take this as a homework, go back and read about it. What is the intermediate state in a checkbox? You can, and to style that intermediate type, you can write intermediate here, and maybe you can style it that way. Okay, then what else? There is also another interesting one, which is called a placeholder shown. So let me first try and style my input type equal to text, right? So all these, so input type text, input type text. Okay, so let me, so this, the other one is email. Okay, and then this is type email, and this is type, this is not an input type, this is a text area. Okay, so when I say input type will text, only this guy gets selected. So input type text, let's say, and let's write something, font size equal to 30 pixels, just for the sake of it. Yes, so this got a font size of 30 pixels. Okay, now there is something interesting. What I can say is placeholder shown. Okay, now there is a difference. There was a pseudo element placeholder that we had discussed in the pseudo element section. This is where the placeholder shown is there. So let me actually use color. color is red. Why is it? Oh, it's a box shadow. Color. So now, when the placeholder is shown, actually this is not a good example. So let it be font size. So currently you see that a placeholder is shown, and that time the font size is 30 pixels, but by default it's 16 or whatever we have set at the top. Okay. Now when you focus onto this, you could also have written a style that on focus, and this is the focus state where it is inside and the cursor is blinking. That is a different state. Okay. Now when you start typing into it, the placeholder is gone, and that is why the font size is gone. Okay, and that's where the font size gets reset. So, and when I remove all the text, the placeholder is shown again, and then this font size equal to 30 pixels starts getting applied. Okay, so again there could be some use case where you want to style the input in a certain way when the placeholder is getting shown, or maybe a use case where the user has focused into that the input, but they have not started typing. Okay, so there could be a use case where you want to style, there could be a lot of use cases, not just styling. You might want to show some text, you might want to show some hint as soon as the user has focused into it and not started typing. Okay, and you can start, and as soon as they start typing you can just remove that hint. Maybe we want to try that out as an exercise. Let me do it. So let us say that this is a hint text. Okay, and this hint text is enter your full name. Okay, and don't worry about it, you would have styled it better. I could have styled it better. There won't be a margin here. This will be very close to this, a little smaller also. Okay, so but forget all that. Let's say we have added a hint text here. Okay, and what we want to do, we only want to show this hint text when the user basically in the placeholder not shown position. Okay, actually let us do it in as a exercise, because we've not done the not selector. We need the not selector here. Okay, so just remember this placeholder shown for now. Okay, what else? So then there is form valid and invalid state also. So you see this email. Now if I type some gibberish here, this is not a valid email. So this will actually get the, hold on. So let me say email, and let me remove this. So if I border 4 pixel blue, 4 pixel solid blue. Okay, so basically we have said that this email input by default it should have a 4 pixel solid blue. Okay, when it is invalid, I want to say that it is 4 pixel red, and when it is valid, I want to say that it is 4 pixel green. Okay, so what we can do, we can simply use this, sorry, invalid, these valid and invalid pseudo classes here. Valid. Okay, so now let me type some nonsense. It is red. Let me type a proper email address. Let my email go. At the rate. See, as soon as you write a proper email address, because now the valid pseudo class applies, it turns to green. Okay, so this is also pretty interesting. By default itself, HTML, this all this form states came after HTML5, where you could use this invalid and valid pseudo classes, and you could style them as you want. There could be the possibilities are nth, right? You could border for you all this type of styles that you've learned. You could style the way they want in in different states, and that is the power of these pseudo elements and pseudo classes that they give you. Okay. uh, what else? So you've learned about these forms. Now let us learn about the occurrence one. Yeah. So then there are other pseudo classes as well. Uh, by the way, any questions till now? Nothing. Cool. Let me continue. So then there are other pseudo classes which are basically dependent upon the occurrence and order. These are again very very powerful. Very powerful and very interesting too. And again, because the UI is so dynamic, that is where these pseudo classes and pseudo elements and all this that you're learning comes into picture. Okay, so now let me just quickly tell you guys, or just remove this, and let me just comment it out for once and show you guys that what we are doing. So right now what we have a section. Inside that we have four paragraphs. First paragraph, second, third, fourth. Okay, inside this section. Okay, now if I go to style and I say inside this section, I'm writing in caps, sorry. Okay, so inside this section, select the first child. Okay, so first child will always select in the list of siblings. It will select whatever is the first child. Okay, so select the first child and turn the color to green. Fair enough. Okay, now let me say select the last child and turn the color to green. Okay, last child also turn green. Let me turn it to magenta. Magenta. Okay, so that's how you will do for last child. Okay, what else we can do? So we can say nth child, and we can say 2, and we can say color is equal to what color? Yellow. Okay, 2 is yellow. Let me say 3. Now 3 becomes yellow. Okay, so again, this is very powerful, and you'll see some of the examples. Right now, I'm just trying to tell you and show you that where we are using these. Okay, we'll actually see some examples where kind of practical examples. Okay, first try and understand what is getting applied, which selector or what element is getting applied when. Okay, so that's very important to understand. Okay, so then there is only child also. Okay, if so, let's say if I say section and only child, and I'll say color is equal to golden rod. Okay, what will change? Nothing will change. Why nothing will change? Because there is no in the list, there is no only child. There is a list of 5 childs. Okay, and if I remove, then golden rod applies. This selector applies. First child, last child, and all that doesn't apply. Then default red color also doesn't apply. So if I remove this, then what will apply? The last child applies, because first child is overridden by the last child. Okay, and 3 will also not apply because there is no 3. Okay, so only child will apply when there is only that particular child. Okay, so let me quickly do this. Okay, now another interesting one. So now let's say when I say section, let me just quickly copy this from here. Section P first child equal to green. Let me just remove all this. Okay, is there a difference? The who can tell me the difference between these two? The earlier one there was no P, and now this has a P. What's the difference? When there is no space between two selectors, the first one is a type selector and the second one is a pseudo class selector. When there is no space between two selectors, they are the composite selector. Basically, the both need to apply. Okay, so now you're saying that P should be the first child. So apply this if paragraph is the first child. That is what you're saying with the selector, and that's true here, and that is why this applies. And as soon as I change this and add a div here, this doesn't start applying because now the first child is no longer P, and that is why this doesn't get applied. Okay, now there is another interesting thing. First of type. Now this gets applied, right? Because now what we're saying that inside select section, okay, whatever paragraphs are there, if it is the first of type, then you color this with green. That's the first of type. Similarly, you have last of type. Similarly, you have nth of type. Okay. However, multiple examples I show you here, you will not, if you are seeing this for the first time, or if you've not used this enough, you will not get it right now. Okay, go back, see this recording, try these examples, try different multiple different first of child, last of child, nth of child, give them different values and see what's the result, and see if they match with the definition that we're talking about right now. Okay, and that is where you should put the understanding. If the color is changing to green, what is happening? We are saying that inside this section, in this HTML document, find all the sections. Inside a section, if you have a paragraph, and if that paragraph is first of the type is what? Type is your types of the tags, paragraph, div, span, right? So here we are saying that if first of type paragraph, whatever that matches, whatever element matches, apply this style which you've written to that particular element. Okay. Any questions? Anyone who didn't get this? Go back and practice first child, last child, nth of child, and first of type, last of type, nth of type. Just go back and practice, try these examples, put it at different places and see what's the result. Okay. We also kind of discussed only child, right? Yes, we discussed only child. If you have only one element, that will get applied. It's similar to only child, it's only of type also. Okay. So if I don't know what, let's say if I say section only child this time, will anything change? Last time nothing changed. This time will anything change? If I say golden rod here, how many say something will change? How many? How many? So basically, all of you are saying that it will be the same. Nothing will change. So not only child, only of type. If I say this, when I said section only child, nothing changed, right? If I say section only of type color golden red, will something change? Yes, the color of the div should change. Why did it change? Because it's in the definition. The definition is that inside this section, if there is something only of a single type, apply this style. And if we go back to our template, we see inside this section, there are 4 P's, but there is only one div. And that is why this gets applied. If I remove everything, all the other P's, what will happen? It will, any confusion here? Cool. So please go back and practice this only child and only of type. First child, last child, nth child, and let us quickly go over and see an interesting example. Okay, so first of all, you have to excuse me. When I had created this table, it was last week, and that time this was just standing. Okay, this data is not new. Okay, so what I want to tell you is when you see when you see this HTML, you see that inside body you just have this H1 written here, and you have this div with ID table. There is no table that we have written, but there is still table if we actually go and check this. So there is this table T head, T body, and it has all this data. So where is it coming from? So I am rendering this table through JavaScript. So inside JavaScript, I've written some code. So imagine that we were using some API, and this API was returning us, the highest scores in the World Cup. Okay, and we got this data, name, number of innings, runs, and best, and then there is a metadata object where there is some information if the best score was a not out or not. Okay, so basically, we have this data, and now we've written some code to actually render this table. Create all the headers and So if I quickly go over this code, what this code is doing? Creating an element of table, creating element t head, t body, and then iterating over the keys of each of this data object, and then creating the header, inserting that. Inside that, again, we are going over all the data rows, and we are setting that child or text inside the table. And we are also doing one more interesting thing, which you will see that here, that we are setting an attribute to each row in this data, each row in the metadata. If there is this key, that key that was not out, which actually we are just adding all the keys, and because it's only one key right now, so that gets added here. So you see this attribute data best was not out. Whatever data we have, false, true, true, false, 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 it gets added. So if you see the data, it's false, true, true, false. We've written some JavaScript to get that in here. Now why am I doing this? Basically, I have multiple times told you that we use all this, and we are learning all this because most of our views that we render is dynamic, and that's why I wanted to show you something dynamic. Okay, so this is where you see this table, which is pretty much rendered based on let's say some API call we made, and you got this data. Okay, now let us do some styling. So forget about this. We just get forget about all this style. I've given some normal styling. Made this bold and capital and things like that. Okay, and we've given some. We've all rendered all the data. We've given border and all. So all these things are pretty normal. Okay, now I want to show you the power, or basically, let's quickly see this the selectors. So let me show you. Oh, 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 oh. Okay, so what happens if I say TD first child, uh, background color is equal to red? TD first child, what does this mean? This means that in this HTML element, find all the TDs, and if that TDs are the first child, you have to turn the background color to red. Okay, and then we see that a lot of them became red. And now this is where I told you, just add this and try and go back and see if it makes sense. Okay, so you see that there were multiple TDs. So if you would have just written TD, okay, not first child or anything like that, then all the TD, all the cells would have become red, right? That makes sense, right? Now what you've written, TDs which are first child. So in a group, Whenever TD is the first child, you turn that background color to red, and that's why it turned red. You see this? Right? Makes sense, right? Okay. Let us turn that and let us see TRs. TRs are rows, right? Inside that. So these are TRs. Inside your TDs, you have all your TRs. So you have the table head and you have the body. Inside the body, you have all these TRs. Okay, the rows. So this is the first row, second row, third row, fourth row, fifth row. Okay, so if I say that TR first child and background color equal to red, now what happens? Yeah, that's not supposed to happen. Yeah, right. This again makes sense, right? By definition, our definition what, that in a list of siblings, the first if it's a TR, it's the first child, that then color the background as red, right? What else can we try? Okay, let's do one more interesting thing which a lot of times you might have seen. So one use case where you say TR nth child and 2n plus 1, background color is equal to hash d. It's a gray shade. Can you see? Let me give it a little darker color because I think sharing the screen it will not be quite visible. Right. So you might have seen tables where alternate rows have different background color. It's actually good for readability. When you have a long list of tables, when the alternate rows are of different colors, it improves the readability. Okay, and see here when we applied that, it started giving that to the alternate rows 2n. Now again, say that why is it 2n? Why did I use this value? I want you to go back and try it out and see what is n. Is n 0 or is n 1? Where does it start from? Even if you don't want to go back and read the specs, you can actually just try out the values and figure it out for yourself. Okay, again, so nth child, last child, all that you can actually, tables are very pretty good in that terms, where you can actually put this nth child, last child, first of type, last of type, and see what are the effects. Okay, so now let me do something interesting. Did we discuss about the not pseudo, not, no, right? So okay, so let me quickly tell you what is a not pseudo class. Okay, so let me say TR first child. Okay, and let us say background color is equal to red. Sorry about that. Okay, so this is not expected, this is expected, right? So TR first child. Now what, where, if let's say we want to say that not the first child, everything other than the first child. Okay, so there is where this not pseudo selector comes into picture, and that is where it is very powerful, and we'll see some examples of this. Okay, and when we say TR not first child, what do you expect? Other than the first child, all other rows should be background color of red. Okay, because it renders to JavaScript, it takes time. Okay, so see, this was expected. So this is again very powerful, and we will see in I see, I think one of the example how can use it. Okay. Oh, I have that example. Okay, it's an exercise for you quickly. Okay, so what is happening here? We saw that this is rendering a table here, right? And see, we have a div here. This div has a class of chart. Okay, and basically let's suppose that some kind of chart was also supposed to be rendered along with the table. Okay, average versus strike rate chart or something like that. Okay, and this chart, we had a nice border. So we use the classic, right? So border 2 pixel solid yellow. So we've styled the container of the chart. Okay, and you see this border is there, the chart has not rendered for some reason. Let's say it was error, or let's say for some reason the chart was not rendered. You didn't get the API response, something like that, and the chart didn't get rendered. Okay, but you see that it's there in the screen. So what do? I want to remove it when the chart didn't render from CSS itself, and you could do it, right? And what you can say is you can use the empty pseudo selector. So what I can say, that dot chart, and if it is empty, empty means that anything that is getting selected by that pseudo class. Okay, if you add empty means if there is nothing between that, the empty will get applied. And of course, it doesn't apply to self-closing tags. Okay, so what I'm saying, that dot chart. Uh, Let me remove this for error. So right now you see you have this, the chart container is there, is nothing inside it, but the border will obviously come, right? So when it is empty, I will say display equal to none. What is display equal to none? When you say display equal to none, that means it will not be shown on the screen itself. Yes, nothing is shown right now, but let me just refresh it quickly. Yeah, so it's not there. Okay, and let me show you that even if you see it here, you'll see it, right? So it's not there, and only because you added this. So let's say I comment this out, okay, and I save this and go back here. You have this chart. You see, you already had this chart, but it'll, what this does, it will not show it. Okay, you have this chart, but because of this property, like remove this property and it'll start showing. As soon as this property gets applied, not show. And let me, for for sake of it, show you also that, let's say you have removed this display none, and so let's say you added this, and now dynamically, let's say the user retried, and now the data got rendered. Let's say something got rendered, okay, and you still have this style, okay, and now this gets rendered, and this is what you expected. And when there is data, you want to render this child, but when it is empty, you didn't want to render it, and that is what your empty pseudo class will do. Okay, see, it's not showing up. Okay, so again, it is basically, this is the knowledge, and now you need to 100% know all this, so that there are ends of use case where this can come up, and only when you know it, you'll be able to apply it. Okay, so next, quickly move on to the next one. Okay, awesome. Now I have a very interesting exercise for you. Okay, we'll actually come back to this table once more, but I quickly want an exercise on the same term. So you see this index of HTML, inside this body, you have an image tag. When we say that width is 600 and the height is 500. Okay, the problem is that there is no source. There is no source at all, and then you have this h1. So there is no source, and this box is still showing up. Okay, what we want to do is, when the source attribute is not there, we want to say that do not show this image. What should be this CSS that we should write for it? So basically what I want to do is, let's say image, okay, and I want to say display none. Okay, but I only want to do it when the source is not there. When the source is, let's say, there, okay, it could be, I don't know, anything. This is actually not a, right now I don't have an image added, so I'll not, some placeholder image. Actually, this is pretty cool. You guys can use it. Okay, so show it.
CSS you have to change now. Display none.
Right. Very. Thank you. Okay. So basically, this image has a source, and we have no styles here. So we have this image and we have the heading. But if the source was not there, we didn't want this, this space to be occupied. We wanted to apply this class, and we all the selectors that you could do to actually fix this. Anyone wants to try quickly? Yes. Yes, I think what Puneet has written might work. So, what Puneet has written is he has added a not, and inside that, he has added an attribute selector saying source. As simple as that. Okay, pretty cool. So basically, when you know all this, you will be able to do all this very easily with CSS. CSS is very powerful. I told you in the last class also, right? There might be people who didn't join. A lot of times I've seen code where people have written JavaScript to do all this. You don't need to do that. You need to know CSS well, okay, to write front end. It's meant to be for a reason. Okay. This is a very cool example. The next one I wanted to show you that, right, in the same one. Okay, what I want to do is I had added this attribute. You remember? Of course, I wanted to do something with that, right? The best was not out. So what does this mean? That these are the best scores, okay, of these people. And what we want to do is, if the best score was not out, against the score we want to add a star. How do we do that? This is your exercise. So basically, for whom is it true? For Virat Kohli, we see that the best was not out. It's true. So basically, next to 103, there should be a star. Then for Mohammad Rizwan also, it's true. So for him also, it should be a star. For others, there should not be a star. Okay. Now I'll give you a hint. Maybe a quick hint. Okay. So how do I add a star? Okay. So let's say I say, how can I add a star? Can someone tell me? So of course this is dynamic data, so you cannot do anything uh, with the template. You have to only write CSS, and you can do it with CSS. Okay. So first, someone tell me, how do I use star? Yes. So basically, I'll use a pseudo element after, because after that, right? So after pseudo element. So after, what I'm saying a TD. Okay, and I'll say content, and I'll add a star. Okay, what does this do? What will it do? Will it So it will add star to everything. Now I just want you to add stars to these, not this 131 star and 103 star. Nothing else should have a star. You wanna try that? How can you do that? You've learned all first child, last child, all that. I'll give you 1 minute. You want the code sandbox link and try? Who wants the code sandbox link? This code sandbox link and wanna try? Okay, cool. Uh, so let me give you this code sandbox link, and yes, hope you can access this, and I'll give you 1 minute to try. Okay, meanwhile, everyone should try. Just try. How will I approach it? Okay, of course I can also, nobody, you can not directly say that what will happen. You can only try things out and say. Okay, so what I want to do is, first thing is, best is the last one only. Okay, so probably I want to select the last column. Okay, how can I select the last column? Class name, you cannot, because you cannot change the template. right? The problem is that this is all dynamic data, right? So you cannot change the template, you cannot modify, add classes and all that. You cannot do that. What the another hint for you is it has an attribute which is data was not out, blah blah blah, whatever that attribute is there, right? You've seen in that code sandbox, all the rows have that. Okay, so you need to figure that out. How can you select that row which has that attribute? TD, Srishendu, will this work? Oh, you mean to say only for the last one? Okay, let's try what Shishendu has given and let's see what happens with this. So he's saying PD last child after content star. Okay, so we did select the last column, which is fair enough, but we want to add the rows also. Okay, so very simple. He's already given you half the answer. Okay, so now you say tr inside the trs which have this attribute. What was that attribute's name? uh, Data best was not out. Data hyphen best was not out, so I can say data hyphen best was not out equal to true if it's there, those rows, and inside that last td after element star. Will this work? Right? It worked. Okay. Now you kind of get my point. Why, why we need all this selectors and attribute selectors and first child, last child, and blah blah blah. Because I'm repeatedly telling you, views, when as a front end developer, views will always be dynamic. It will, you based on the data you will create all the views. Think about any website you see, any website you use, everything is dynamic, everything is data driven, right? And when things are data driven, you have these powers in css to do things. Okay, quickly, we have 20 minutes. I'll quickly discuss combinators with you. Again, something very powerful. We have some exercises also, interesting ones, but I'll quickly do these. Okay. uh, cool. So combinators, again, what are combinators? Can someone tell me what are combinators? Raise hands quickly, tell me what are combinators. Descendant combinator, next sibling combinator, subsequent sibling, direct descendant, what are these? Someone? Yes, Puneet.
Vikram, I think I have some idea. Like we do write like P, and then there is this angled bracket, and then an A. So that would mean like an A link inside a P, or maybe inside a div if we say D div angle bracket A, right? So those could
Yes.
be like descendants or like something like
Right,
that.
right. You're right. So I'll explain. So what Puneet is telling is, okay, what Puneet is saying, something like this, that PD and PR, this, and you write styles inside that. So these are basically combinates between two selectors. Whatever is there, that's a combinator. So between two selectors, TD and TR are two selectors. Okay, even if there is a space, that's a combinator. Okay, and if there is this, or if there is this, or if there is this, all these are combinator. Okay, and what does this mean? This let us actually see what does this mean. Okay, so I will quickly go over each of these examples one by one. Let me open the combinator example very quickly. Okay, so very quickly, what do you see here is you have some sort of uh, tree-like structure, right? A hierarchy kind of thing. And again, imagine that this is all coming from backend. Okay, you just made a query for list of people in the company, or basically title or designations in the company, and you got this data from the backend, and you rendered this dynamically. Okay, so basically you have on the top you have this CEO, and inside CEO you have CFO and CTO and CPO, and inside CTO you have VP of engineering and VP of product quality. Okay, and then for inside head of inside chief of product also you have head of UX. Okay, now the thing is, what you see here is all cool by the font size, because we have used H1, H2 and H3. You can see a kind of hierarchy, right? Okay, but we want to create some visual hierarchy also, and that is where I'll show you the power. Okay, let me quickly just show you first this, that let me just write dot wrapper. If I say dot wrapper, what am I selecting? This guy, this div, background, just for the sake, just for showing to you. Okay, because basically everything turned red. This has some color, and let me show you. Remove. So basically, you set the wrapper and the background color of it. When I say wrapper and I say article, what does that mean? Okay, that means that now I'm targeting this guy. Basically, article is taking all the space of wrapper, so you see this. Okay, and to just give you an example, this thing, so that you don't beat me for this, I'll say padding to 24 pixels. Because padding will also take it into account, right? Let me add padding to this guy, then you'll be able to see it. Okay. And let me add a background color of a different background color to this guy. Okay, now you see, so you have the wrapper, and then it had some padding, and then inside that you have this article. Okay, so when you don't give, when you don't write anything in between, and there is only a space, that means that you are applying this. So what we are saying here, that that dot wrapper, so basically dot wrapper means anything that has a class of wrapper inside any article, so anywhere in the DOM. So basically, let's say you have directly you have an article, you have a div, so directly you have an article element there, you have a div, inside that again you have an article element, inside that again you have an article element. Anywhere inside the wrapper, if you have the article element, this will get applied to it anyway. So basically, this goes and searches everywhere inside, all levels of nesting. Even if there are 1,000 levels of nesting, it will go inside and apply to everything. Okay, and when you say, and that's the difference, when you say this, that means only direct child. Okay, that means the article should only be the direct child of this guy. Okay, so if I actually, to just demonstrate, if I add a div here, sorry, let me add a div here, how outside article, so that article goes inside this div. Okay, and when we say that, this doesn't get applied, because what we said, that article needs to be the direct child of the wrapper when we say this descendant, when we use this descendant combinator. Okay, and because it's not, so it's the background color red is not getting applied, and if we remove it, it will get applied, because this says that find article anywhere inside this, and then you apply the styles to it. Okay, that's the difference. Now, a lot of times people take this guy for granted. And though I have already shown you what is the difference, I actually wanted to actually demonstrate something pretty cool. Top, and inside that you have these divs. So what I want to show you, you have this class top, and inside that you have this div. Okay, this div has again a h1 and again a div. This div has couple of h2s and then again a div. Okay, so what I want to say is padding. I want to give only padding left to it and 20 pixels. And you see that it kind of created that, first level of padding 20 pixels, and then second level of padding has again a 20 pixel, right? And just to show you what's happening, and let me add some border to it. You see, this is the main top div, this one on the top, and then this is the second one. This has a padding here, okay? And then because there is again a div here, this div, this again has a padding, okay? Then there is a third div, this one again has padding, okay? And that is why this is, you can just, by a very simple CSS, we were able to create this simple, kind of a tree kind of effect. And that's because this direct child, not direct child, basically any child combinator is actually recursive in manner. Okay, pretty cool. Let me go over to the next one very quickly. The next one, so basically we did the descendant, sorry, we did the descendant, which is only, basically there is just the space, there is nothing in between. And then we did the direct descendant, where we said that you have this greater than sign, okay? And then let's see the next child. So basically here in this, you see that you have this box, and inside that you have this three P's. Okay, and in these P, when we say, and you see this dog, give some style. Okay, P, P. Okay, so this top, and when we say that P here, a space in between, this says that inside, find all the P's inside top and give it this styling. When we say P plus P, what does this mean? Not a capital. This means that basically the next sibling, okay? So if you have a P and the next sibling is also a P, then apply a style to it. Okay, so let's just actually do something. So let's say we have all these paragraphs and we wanted to add some space in between all these. Okay, so let's add this margin top, just to demonstrate and kind of real world example to you. Okay, so what happens here? Refresh. Why is it not applying? It should apply, right? Margin top, is it not getting it? Oh. Okay, no worries. Let me quickly check this in the new screen. Sorry. So these are my P's. Okay. So this again, specificity comes into picture, and because top P becomes more specific, that overrides it. So let me add dot top P to it, just for the sake of it. And now you see that basically, just forget about specificity. So now what, or if I remove this, even that will start getting applied. Okay. So it yes, okay. So now, but let me not do that. Let me remove all the margins from this, and let me do this. Okay, so what we're saying is we've added margin 20 to all this p paragraphs. Okay, but what I don't want is I don't want the stop margin. I want margins only in between. Okay, and what is this p plus p? P plus p. Whenever you say plus something, that means the next sibling to it. Okay, so when I say p plus p, and let me not actually let me do it something else, so that top p plus p, what will this, and let's say background color red. Every time I give two semicolons. Okay, so what does this say? That whatever, so basically I told you, right, that whenever you write a combinator, it basically that combinator separates two selector. So this is the first selector and this is the second selector. Okay, so first selector says that select all the p's that are inside this top, the element with the class top. Okay, and this plus says that select everything to this which is the next sibling. What is sibling? Basically the next sibling to this. So with this p, what is the next sibling that is also a paragraph? This. With this p, what is the next sibling that's also a paragraph? This. With this p, what is the next sibling that's also a paragraph? None. Right? And that is why when you say top p plus p, the background color red gets applied to these two. And that is what you can do to this to solve this problem, where you just only give it to the next ones and you don't give it to the first one. And that is a kind of real life example where you kind of use this. So what the again, there will be nth number of examples. The point to remember is combinators always come between two selectors. Here you have the combinator plus. What does this mean? This means it will always select the next sibling immediately after it. Whatever the sibling is, that it will select based on this selector. Okay, so this is one selector and this is another selector. And what it says, it inside top, whatever the paragraph is there, next paragraph, if it is also a p, apply these styles to it. Okay, then you also have something called your subsequent sibling. What it is, it basically doesn't mean that it necessarily needs to be the next sibling. It can be any of the sibling, and that's why you see that even when you added the subsequent sibling, it didn't change, because it is a next sibling, but it could be the second sibling, third sibling also. Okay, and let me actually quickly show you one of the examples to demonstrate that very quickly. Okay, so in this you have some list. We have this title, you have this description. So H2P span, and then you have again an H2 and again a span. Okay, what do I want to do is, let's say I want to style all the spans inside my list items to red color. Okay, let's say I want to do that. So what will I write? Inside my list items, okay, whatever spans I have, okay, I want to color them red. Okay, now let's say there was whenever there is some kind of warning, you show that in a p tag. Okay, or let's say whenever there is some warning, this comes with a class, no dot required, this comes with a class. So now let's say what you want to do is, you want to style all the spans which are next to warnings in red color. As simple as that. So inside LE, find all the dot warnings, and let's say if I just say inside LE dot warning, So it will select this guy, right? But you don't want to select this guy. You don't want to select the one which has the class warning. You want to select, if there is a warning class, you want to select the next sibling. And that's why, what is the next sibling? The next sibling is plus span. So this guy, and this gets selected. What if, you know, it was that whenever an H2 has a class of warning, okay, then select the span. This will not work, right? Why this will not work? Because the next sibling to the warning is not a span. The next sibling to this warning is a p tag. So in this case, you could use a subsequent sibling selector. And that's how you select it, right? Again and again, you might think that, hey, we could give a class and we could do all that. When you start working on real world projects, you will not be able to add class IDs and things like that. Data will always be dynamic, and that's why you need to know all this. Okay, you can do stuff by, you know, manipulating JavaScript and writing a lot of code which is unnecessary. Okay, you need to know your tools, and that's for if you know your tools, you become a better mechanic. Okay, we'll quickly do a very good exercise. Any questions before we jump into the last exercise of this class today? Find this interesting? No, good. Okay, cool. Let me just get over the last exercise. I think no questions here. Okay, so now I'll give you this code sandbox, but don't worry about this. This is just go back and this is just don't think that it's very beautifully styled. It's some just normal styles. Okay, but there is something interesting that I want to do now. Okay, so we've written some selectors and all that to do some styling. Okay, but what I want to do is by default I want to keep this hidden. Okay, and whenever you hover onto this paragraph, I want to make this visible. How can I do that? Please, okay, I'll give you this code sandbox link. Try it out. 1 minute. What am I saying? By default, this guy is hidden. So let's try to write a CSS for this. So where is this guy? So let us find it. This is our template. Again, this template is dynamic. Okay, it's coming from some backend and it's getting rendered dynamically. So this body, it has this section. Here we have this P, that is the last child here. Okay, and then you have this code and you have all these other P's and all also. Okay, so I think what we can do is section and P, and I can say last child, and we can say because we want to hide it first, right? We want to hide it first. We want to show it only when we hover onto this. Okay, so first let's hide it. So let's say display this. Let's use visibility this time. Visibility hidden used to be the most basic CSS interview question. What is the difference between visibility hidden and display none? Uh, I'm sure a lot of you know it. Can someone tell me? Raise hands and tell me first what is the difference between visibility hidden and display none? Someone other than Puneet? Someone other than Shishendu? Someone other than Orbindo? Someone else? Then these three? There are 17 people still left. Can someone please, other than these three, talk for last time? Maybe? No, 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 no. Then I'll go to Aurobindo maybe. Maybe I talked to him only once. Aurobindo?
Yeah. So display none removes the element completely. Visibility hidden keeps the element, but the visibility is like none.
You're right. So basically, when you see visibility hidden, the space is still left by the DOM. And when you say display none, the browser will actually not keep the space itself. Okay. So display none, so there is no space, but visibility is hidden. It keeps the space, but it removes this. Okay, so in this case, actually we don't want the space right now. So we say that display none. Now what we're trying to say is when you again you cannot add classes now. So when you hover onto this guy, okay, only then you and oh something interesting happened. There was one more P that went away. This guy also went away. Why did this guy also go away? Because you see that there is a quote. This is a quote tag. Inside that there is a P, and because this that is also a last child inside this. What are we saying? We are saying that select all paragraphs inside section which are last child. So even this poor guy is the last child inside the section. Okay, and this is recursive. Okay, so let me just write what last child and not quote P. Maybe there is some better way to write it also, but let me write that. And that what happens with that? You have this P, and that the other P went away, right? The only P that we wanted to remove. Okay. Now what we're saying that on hover of this guy, you have to say this display block, and then it will be visible. Okay, you have to write some selector and say display block, and then it will start getting visible. But what should that selector here be? Can someone try last exercise here? Cool, let me do it. So what are we trying to say here? What are we trying to first we need to select that guy. Okay, so let us figure out what is that guy. Okay, how can we find that guy, this highest blah blah blah? I can simply do it with nth of type, right? Nth of type P, which is third P in this, or nth child, just no P but nth child. If I put it, we can do it that ways also. Okay, so what can I do? Section P, and we can say section P. Let us just try the order and see which is it getting applied to. Nth child, and let's say 3. And let us say color, no, font size, so that we're able to just make out where what is getting applied. Font size 48 pixels. Okay, so it applied to this guy. So let us just add to the next one. Okay, so now we are able to add it to this guy. Okay, so display block. Okay, but what we are saying that when we have selected this paragraph and hover of this paragraph, on hover of this paragraph, let me again say font size of this guy itself is 24 pixel. Okay, so when I hover onto this, it becomes 24 pixel. Okay, but what we are trying to say is when we hover onto this guy, we need to select the other guy, the last one. Okay, so how do we select that guy? So that guy is the subsequent sibling of this guy. We need to give it a display first, then only it will show the font size. Now let me hover onto this and it starts showing the other element. Now you say that you have unnecessarily complicated this question. Why would you want to show some text on hover that is sibling? You know, you if you've not experienced use cases, you will experience weirdest of use cases. Okay, and imagine, you know, again I'll repeat the same thing. I've seen people write 50 lines of JavaScript code to achieve that, right? You could do it with the power of CSS. Okay, so this is where I wanted to show you this subsequent sibling select combinators. We discussed all the combinators as well, right? And that was mostly the class. I think we already have gone past the time. I wanted to just quickly tell you what Yeah, tooltip, right? Tooltip is one of these, one of where you can use this. I want to actually quickly give show you the assignment what you have, and if there are any questions on the next assignment, I wanted to take that. The next assignment is actually your component library. You're building a component library. What is a component library? You don't worry about it, right? How can I build a component library? Component library is nothing. It's just a site styled. It's a CSS file. Okay, in a CSS file, you write button, you give it some styles. That is your component library, which anyone can use, and when they use that, their buttons will be styled in a way that you want. Yeah, you might have created a very fancy transparent kind of a button. You've written some CSS. Now, if I want to use that in my project, I can just import your CSS and use that. Okay, so what you're writing is just that CSS file. Okay, you can write kind of basically you can write a HTML kind of documentation where you have a heading, button. You apply that class onto that, or even don't apply the class. If you can just have you can use the type selectors and have buttons, headings. So there are different, you can create different kind of in forms, passwords and in forms. So all input type text should be styled in a certain way. By default browser has some style, but you can give some different kind of styles, right? So typography styles, h1, h2, h3. You can have h1, h2, h3s, and you can actually say that you can give some styles, that font style is equal to this for all the headings. That is basically, and all this combined becomes your component library, right? You have used component library in the first class, right, where you had this list of component libraries, and where you actually use those component library and you saw different styles, right? Now you are writing something like that, so you have all the details. You can go back to any of these, you right? What is these component libraries, you use them, right? And if you actually see them, they're just CSS. It's just CSS. You have to also use this is minified CSS, so you see it like this. uh, yep, this will all be minified. Okay, so basically if you go to the GitHub of, okay, let me actually quickly show you. So there should be a GitHub link, right? In the end or at the start? So okay, anyways, right, this is not minified, right? So I was looking for the GitHub link to show you unminified CSS. This is unminified anyways. So you see they've added some styles. Again, forget about media and all that. What you don't understand is forget about that, right? But otherwise, see, for buttons they have written some styles. So if you use this, your buttons will be styled and these styles will apply, and they'll be styled in that way. So you see, inputs will be styled in that way, right? So just create this, have that styles, and now you might say that, where do you use it in your next project, anywhere, right? Interchange these libraries amongst yourself and use it in your next projects. Okay, but the assignment details everything, what components you can build, where are the references and everything. We don't have a lot of time, otherwise I would have just quickly shown you, written that and shown you, but that's fine. But this is your assignment. Take a look. If you have any doubts, please shoot it on the WhatsApp. Okay, I hope you learned a lot of new things. I have put in a lot of effort to actually find out these small quirks, and actually written a lot of code to actually show you some practical examples, right? To show you to give you that idea of why these things are important, and why these things would certainly are very much required if you want to become a front-end developer, right? You can use Tailwind, you can use Bootstrap, you can use those classes to apply stylings. But when you have dynamic views, which is mostly everywhere, you can do the base layouting with your libraries, with your component libraries which you will build. You can always put the base styling, but all those subtle styling, subtle things, right? You'll need to have knowledge of all the selectors, combinators, and all that we have discussed. Okay, any questions before we wind up? No? Cool. Hope you guys learned. If you have any feedback, please put your feedback on Luma. Thanks a lot. Have a great time. Bye bye.